Clint Eastwood sat silently backstage at The View, his eyes scanning the set with the same calculated calm that had made him a legend. He wasn't just there for small talk, he had a message to deliver. The crowd buzzed in anticipation, waiting for the unexpected moment when two cinematic giants would clash not with fists, but with words. The air grew electric as Robert De Niro stepped forward, animated, full of passion, ready to challenge. Clint stayed cool, his silence louder than any outburst. He wasn't rattled. He never was. When De Niro began speaking, it wasn't long before the tone shifted. His criticism of political figures, Hollywood hypocrisy, and even Eastwood's past roles ignited the fire. Clint, known for avoiding loud drama, finally leaned in. His voice, raspy and steady, cut through the tension like a blade. "You talk like you're the conscience of Hollywood," Clint said, "but when did yelling become wisdom?" The audience gasped. De Niro didn't back down. He laughed, mocking Clint's age and what he called outdated masculinity. Clint, ever calm, simply nodded and said, "Let's see if you laugh when the world stops clapping." The studio froze. No one had ever dared to go toe-to-toe with Robert like that. But Clint didn't flinch. De Niro stood, raising his voice, accusing Clint of enabling narratives that he said hurt progress. Clint's reply was simple but crushing. "You play the same angry man in every film. Maybe it's not acting anymore." The room erupted. Hosts struggled to take back control. De Niro, red-faced and fuming, got up from his chair and pointed at Eastwood, saying he wouldn't share the stage with a relic. That was the breaking point. Clint stood up, slowly, and stepped forward. He didn't yell. He just said, "Then don't." The words hung in the air like gunpowder. Producers scrambled behind the scenes, trying to manage the chaos. De Niro shouted, "This is a joke." But Clint didn't need to raise his voice. He simply turned to the hosts and said, "If this show values real dialogue over loud theatrics, maybe it's time he left." The silence was deafening. Security appeared, not to protect Clint, but to guide De Niro off stage. The audience didn't know how to react. Cheers and boos blended in a wild symphony. One of the hosts tried to smooth things over with a joke, but Clint's presence still dominated the room. As De Niro walked off, shouting over his shoulder, Clint calmly sat back down. "He's been in the echo chamber too long," Clint said. "He forgot what listening sounds like." The studio was stunned. It was no longer just an episode of a talk show, it had become a historic moment in live television. The fallout came fast. Social media exploded. Clips of the confrontation went viral within minutes. Fans were divided. Some praised Eastwood's stoic control, others backed De Niro's fire. But no one could deny one thing. This moment would be remembered. Commentators dissected every word, every glance. Memes spread like wildfire. Late-night hosts had a field day. And the hosts of The View issued a carefully worded statement praising passionate dialogue, while never taking sides. Backstage, Eastwood sat quietly in his dressing room. A producer came in and said, "That might have been the most talked about segment in our show's history." Clint just looked up and said, "Then maybe people are finally listening." Meanwhile, De Niro left the building in silence. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, not extinguished, but changed. He realized he'd let emotion carry him too far, too fast. He wasn't used to losing control. Critics weighed in, with some calling Eastwood the last of the old-school gentlemen, a man who speaks with presence instead of volume. Others claimed he ambushed De Niro, catching him off guard with quiet jabs and unexpected poise, but in the court of public opinion, the lines were drawn. Neither man would apologize. They didn't need to. The moment had already stamped itself into cultural memory. It wasn't just a feud. It was a symbol of two Americas clashing live on television. In the days that followed, De Niro released a statement calling for unity but refused to directly address Clint. Eastwood stayed silent. His fans said he didn't need to speak. The message was already sent. The producers of The View offered to bring them both back for a follow-up, but Eastwood declined. "I said what I had to say," he told an insider. "I'm not here for encores." That line itself became a trending quote, shared on shirts, tweets, and podcasts. Some said Clint Eastwood symbolized tradition and measured strength. Others said he was a fading shadow of an era better left behind. De Niro was praised for his fire, his refusal to back down. But critics asked, did his anger help or hurt his cause? Analysts debated, podcasts speculated, and late-night shows reenacted the moment. But through all the noise, one image stood tall, Clint Eastwood, unmoved, delivering a quiet knockout with just a few words. It was more than just a fight between two actors. It was a generational standoff. It was art, politics, ego, and legacy colliding in a single unscripted hour. And though De Niro left the stage, Clint's shadow stayed behind, filling every seat, every camera, every lingering breath. Some called it power, others called it control, but everyone agreed, it was unforgettable. And while fans hoped for reconciliation, both men retreated to their circles. Clint returned to his ranch, focusing on his next film. De Niro gave a speech at a film festival days later, fiery and full of conviction, without ever naming names. The clash had passed, but its echo remained. It spoke to the times. It spoke to the people. It reminded everyone that real tension doesn't need scripts or punches, just presence and purpose. And as the internet continued debating who was right, who was wrong, one fact stood above opinion. Clint Eastwood had kicked Robert De Niro off The View, not with rage, but with resolve. And in doing so, he reminded the world what silence and precision could still do in a noisy world.